You're hanging out in the House of Sunny podcast, where it's always sunny, mostly because of your host, comedian and YouTuber, Sunny Lohman. Want to know what Sunny and her friends are thinking about this week? Well, here she is, Sunny Lohman.
Welcome. It's always sunny here at the House of Sunny podcast, mostly because I'm here, your host, Sunny. I'm here with the usual sidekick, Doug, from the Rational Capitalist. Hey, Doug.
Hello. How are you?
And we're just going to jump right into joke telling. We got a joke on the voicemail. Here it comes.
All right.
Okay, Sonny, a new joke. The trial has been going on for 3 days. The man accused of committing the crime stood up and approached the judge's bench. Your Honor, he said, I'd like to change my plea from innocent to guilty of all charges. The judge angrily banged his fist on the gas and said, if you're guilty, why didn't you say so in the first place and save us all this trouble and inconvenience? The accused looked wide-eyed and said, well, at the start, I thought I was innocent, but that was before I heard all the evidence against me. Bye.
That could happen.
Yeah, definitely.
That could totally happen. Oh my God, I really
story.
committed that crime.
I'd say on a scale of 1 to 10 on delivery, I'm going to give the caller a 4.
Okay, 4 for delivery. What about content?
I'm going to say 5.5.
Really?
Maybe
You thought
6.
that joke was good? You liked that joke?
Well, someone's haunting. They liked it.
You thought his delivery could have been a little bit better.
Yeah, it could have been. It's hard to deliver a joke over the phone. So for effort, I'm going to give him a 10.
I give this guy, he gets an 11 out of 10 because he calls in every week. I love him. He's our joke man.
Yeah, he's the joke guy.
He's the House of Sunny podcast joke man.
So no matter how we rank his jokes, the fact that he's even doing it gives him he's part of the show.
He's part of the show. You can be part of the show too. Call in your joke next week. If I had the phone number at this is why we don't have callers, because I'm disorganized.
Well, also we don't have any jokes.
Yeah, I didn't have any jokes this week myself.
We're so strung out from all the mania and depressing news that I haven't even been thinking of jokes. I'm not even, on that side of my brain. I'm just knee deep in thinking about all this craziness, right?
That is true.
Horrible.
This week, I'm sure everybody's probably feeling that if you pay attention to jokes or to news. This week has been particularly bad, and it's only Wednesday. Okay, so here's our number, 707-681-5834. Call in a joke so we're not sitting here awkwardly talking about why we don't have jokes. But yeah, this week has been tough, and we're going to get into the whole Alex Jones thing. I'm actually recording the podcast today in the living room because there's jackhammering going on at my neighbor's house. And
why?
Well, so some rich people bought this house next to us, and this house is it's a weird neighborhood. This house is kind of like it was probably built in the 60s. And it's kind of small, but the neighborhood, it's primo land, right in the heart of Sonoma, near the downtown square. It's like a beautiful neighborhood. So you got this old house, some old lady lived in it and died, and somebody bought it for, I don't know, like $1.4 million, this little tiny shitty house.
Jesus.
And not only did they buy it for that much money, but they've been sitting on it for 6 months. Nothing has happened. They didn't move in. It's just been sitting there growing weeds. And all of a sudden on Monday,
weed?
Right, I wish I'd be over there making a fortune.
Okay, weeds, not weed.
And you can believe that in California that could actually happen, and it would be like normal. But no, it's been sitting there vacant and getting kind of decrepit looking for the last 6 months. And finally on Monday, a couple guys showed up, and now they're demoing the house.
Ooh.
And today happens to be rip out a pool day, just like yesterday. So they're jackhammering a pool.
Rip out the pool. Okay.
Rip out
now,
a
this
whole
isn't
pool.
the woman with the cat, with the competing cat, is it?
That's across the street. This is my next door neighbor. But yeah, so I'm a little noise sensitive. I can't really handle jackhammering in my ear all day. It's been kind of rough.
Yeah, unlike other people who love the sound of the mellow tones of the jackhammer.
Yeah. I live in this incredibly quiet, peaceful neighborhood, and then now there's this chugga 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 chugga, and I'm in the front of the house with all the windows shut, but you may still hear it. There's nowhere for me to go to escape it. In fact, when I'm done with this, I think I'm going to leave and go sit in a coffee shop for the rest of the morning because it's really hard to take. It really grates on you.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's happening. But we're going to talk about Alex Jones. The news organization has been taken off the internet, in case you didn't hear. I'm going to do my best Alex Jones first here when we get into it, because before we get into the details, you should know the whole thing is masterminded by a Mexican kingpin who's having a love affair with the Chinese leader's dragon lady's daughter.
You sound a little bit like Fat Albert.
Oh, really? He's got a southern
Is Alex
accent.
Jones like an old southern black guy now?
I got to work on my Alex Jones.
You sound like Mr. T a little bit, actually.
Do I? Maybe that's just me. That's just a little bit of me. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Fool.
I pity the fool who thinks I'm Alex Jones because I'm really Mr. T. Alex Jones is really a black man from the South. That's our conspiracy theory. Seriously, if you watch this video that he put out after this whole thing happened, it's full of conspiracy theories. But we are going to get into some of those conspiracy theories because some of it's legit, and it's not a conspiracy theory if there's actually overt, visible facts that you can look at and see for yourself.
Of course.
So if you don't know what happened, let me just recap here. InfoWars, which is Alex Jones' news site, which is incredibly popular, right? I mean, millions of people follow InfoWars. And I don't follow InfoWars except the hilarious Alex Jones memes that are constantly circulating are maybe some of the best, funniest memes ever. But I do like Paul Joseph Watson, who has his videos are posted on InfoWars. And I don't know how those guys hooked up, but Paul Joseph Watson, I'm just going to call him PJW, he was probably just like kind of an obscure YouTuber and then was picked up by InfoWars and became a huge thing. And he's really good and he's worthy of being a huge thing. I think he's a rational guy. I don't hear him pushing conspiracy theories. He's really just got kind of a sarcastic... He will provide you the news of what's going on, and he does it with a lot of humor and sarcasm. So I of course love him because
he's brilliant.
He's very smart. He's always got a really good take on things, and he's very funny. So he's great. He's hooked up with Alex Jones. That's the only person on InfoWars that I watch. But anyway, his whole InfoWars empire has been deleted from Facebook, from YouTube, from Apple, from Spotify, and now even Pinterest, and all of these people within an hour of each other. So Doug was just messaging me that my audio is going in and out. That's not good. I wonder if that's Skype or...
It might be Skype because you're cycling like in and out.
Yeah.
On my line at least.
Well, maybe it's just what you can hear, but maybe my recording will be good. We'll hope. We'll hope that my recording is decent. So all within hours of each other, which I think is the most suspicious aspect of this. It's one thing if Apple decides, we're not going to carry InfoWars, which surprises me because Apple generally tries to stay apolitical, or at least did under Steve Jobs, and Tim Cook at least pays some lip service to that, even though, as soon as Steve Jobs was dead, I don't even think the body was cold before Tim Cook went and sat next to Michelle Obama at the State of the Union address. I don't know if you remember that, but I remember seeing that and going, oh, well, here we go. Apple just went political. And of course, since then, Steve Jobs used to have a strict policy, no charity. The company would give no charity at all to anyone. He just had a strict policy about that. I think it was probably a good policy. It kept the company from being political. And that was the first act. Tim Cook's first act as new CEO was to change that policy. Literally his first act.
Ugh.
So, he was sitting in the background waiting to have access to all those, billions of dollars and all of that influence, because immediately he's sitting at Michelle Obama's elbow and giving to charity suddenly. That was his first act as CEO before Steve Jobs' body was even cold. So Tim Cook is a leftist, and so he immediately took the company political. But I gotta, they've continued to be very strict about not giving data up, protecting the privacy of their users. They refuse to unlock the phone for the FBI, stuff like that. At least in public, they're paying lip
Supposedly.
service, to the privacy of their customer. So this is kind of, it was sudden, it was immediate. It started with Apple. If it's just Apple, you go, oh, well, okay, that sucks and it's wrong, but you can at least get InfoWars on YouTube. Oh no, YouTube at the same time, Spotify and Facebook. So this happened immediately. Alex Jones was immediately silenced by everybody except Twitter. I guess Twitter's the only social media company who has yet to ban them. But I don't know.
This wasn't, by the way, another fact was they were taken down within 48 hours of circulating a petition to pardon Julian Assange.
We'll get into that. I don't want to get into this yet. I'm just giving an overview. So now everyone is talking about this, of course, but I think Doug and I can have an interesting take on it because we're objectivists. So what that means is that unlike some on the right, we have pretty well-defined political principles that are for a very limited government. But unlike libertarians, who could also say that, and not all libertarians, but some libertarians, we believe that knowledge is contextual. So we don't apply principles like religious dogma that have to be followed regardless of the facts. So there's no duty, for example, to elevate some non-aggression principle over your own survival. So if Iran is building nukes, it's okay to stop them. We can actually initiate force in that case for our own survival. And so that's just an example of how we kind of think about things. And here that Doug and I do not agree with the idea that people have some sort of weird freedom of movement to cross our border that they're, I don't even know if that applies, but that seems like a libertarian idea to me but that's even just kind of a negation of the nation state. So maybe I don't even want to get into that right now. I was trying to think of an example, Doug, where libertarians and objectivists depart politically because objectivists we actually believe that the primary is ethics. It's, rational self-interest that comes before political principles, and it's what political principles depend on. But the way that you apply any knowledge is that you take into account the facts of reality and you use your principles in those moments. But
well, there's a lot of examples, I think, where foreign policy is probably the primary area.
I think it's the easiest one where you can see the difference between libertarians and objectivists.
But there's also libertarians, though, that reject the concept of intellectual property and don't think that, that think that that's a form of coercion,
a form of force or something like that.
Yeah, because again, they're elevating the principle of non-aggression as their primary rather than the principle of non-aggression being
right.
That's a consequence of more fundamental principle that we're trying to live freely and we're trying to pursue our values. The means to the end is government. It's not the primary. And so, when you say non-aggression, to them, that might mitigate or obviate our ability to, act in our own self-defense, either on our border or in a foreign policy.
Even within our communities, I think a lot of libertarians are against cops. They're against police force being a government agency. They want it to be private somehow.
Yeah. They're almost anarchists, or they are outright anarchists.
Some are actually, but anyway. So in general, we're completely opposed to any government involvement in the free market of the internet. In general, that would be my policy. In general, a company should have the right to decide that they don't like Alex Jones and his crazy, his Mr. T crazy. But I ask, I mean, what I'm seeing is, I think some questions to ask are these really free markets? And are these really free companies?
No. And no.
And even if they are, do we care at this point? I mean, at some point when your life is on the line, and I'm not saying we're at that point, I'm absolutely not, we're going to discuss that, I think, here right now, because I'm actually not sure when that point comes. When do we really have to fight in a way that just throws all this stuff out? Because everybody agrees that during war, in a real war, you don't not kill a woman, an innocent woman, because you are bombing Berlin, but you don't want to bomb Berlin because you might kill an innocent. I mean, you have to throw that shit out in war. You have to win the war, and you're on either the right side or the wrong side in a war. You're either the good guys or the bad guys. You're either the Allies or the Nazis. So if you're the Nazis, I'm sorry, but you're going to get bombed, and that we're right to bomb you, even if you're the innocent woman who didn't actually do anything wrong. Unfortunately, you're in that country, and that's it, and we're at war, and I think everybody understands that. So at some point in the United States, if our free speech is on the line here, and I feel like it is, and I think we can all agree that it is, the government is attacking it, but also we're losing it socially. We've already lost it socially in a lot of ways. So, at what point do we have to actually fight back like we're in an actual battle for it, and throw out all the niceties of civil society? So I think we'll kind of get into that. But the first thing to get into is, are these really free markets? Is the internet really free? Are these companies really free? And I kind of already started talking about Apple. And Tim Cook sitting with Michelle and Barack Obama at the State of the Union doesn't mean he's not a free man running a free company. But I think there's other evidence that shows that they're not really free.
Yeah, there's massive amounts of evidence that illustrate these companies aren't really free. We have a corporatist system, not really a free market, but if you want, I think I want to make this point and get your take on it too, is I think we have to start even further back here, picking up on a point that you made, that we are the good guys. I mean, first you have to state, what's our goal? Our goal is to live as free people and to live and pursue our values. And the goal is not free markets per se. The goal is to live great lives and pursue our values, and for that necessitates freedom and free markets and
right,
all the things that we believe in. And so, first of all, we believe in freedom as a means to pursue our values and pursue our lives.
Right.
And so our
That's
goal,
such a good point. It's not an end in itself. Political freedom is not an intrinsic good. It's only good because it is the best way to live free and happy, to live a happy, productive, valueful life.
Exactly. And so, from that standpoint, we have to seize the moral high ground, and that those of us who defend freedom as a means towards our own rational self-interest in pursuing our lives, we're the good guys. We're the ones who want freedom. We don't want the government controlling our lives. We don't want people using force or the initiation of force to prevent us from pursuing our values. In other words, we don't want people violating our rights. And so that's our ultimate end goal, period. So let's step back and just say, we're the good guys here. The bad guys are the ones who espouse government control in many different forms, whether it's through economic controls, through censorship of people's ideas, through controlling speech, through controlling how people assemble and how they trade and how they produce. And so the left is the bad guys. They're the ones who want to, And so to the extent that you in any way, I think, are acting to thwart freedom-loving people, you're the bad guy, and we're the good guy. So I think it's not just a legal argument, which we're going to get into, and we absolutely have to because the context here is so important. I just wanted to throw this out there that I think in a lot of these legalistic arguments, we're losing sight of the fact that it's an outrage that anyone would shut down people that espouse freedom and liberty.
Right.
That's an outrage, period.
And InfoWars has that kooky conspiracy theory side, but they're on the right because they're generally pushing a libertarian political message. They're actually not, and he's been really pro-Trump. He's been a big Trump supporter. Whatever you think about Trump, anyway, InfoWars is on the right. And it's not just Alex Jones. Yeah, it's Paul Joseph Watson. It's other people like that. But silencing InfoWars is an attempt to silence somebody on the right who's on our side. I'm sorry, but whether you like Alex Jones or not, he's actually on the side of the right. He's actually been pushing a pro-liberty message. So you may not like him and you may not like his crazy, but, and I don't even really watch him, so I don't know how crazy the crazy gets. I just watch the funny memes that people make of his crazy. Mm-hmm. But he's on the right.
Yeah. And it's not, and obviously the issue we're talking about here disproportionately affects conservatives and libertarians. So I'm speaking even more broadly than just Alex Jones. There's a whole, there's ample evidence that while some of these sites are shutting down leftists as well, they're disproportionately affecting conservatives, and they're throttling conservatives and demonetizing conservatives.
There have been endless articles that prove this case. And if you don't think this is true and you're listening to this, go Google it, man. There's endless articles that provide screenshot evidence of bias against the right. It's been going on now really since the internet companies got organized post Trump's election. My own experience is that I have really weird stats on my posts, where the more comments and shares I get, the sometimes lower my reach is. So that's just that doesn't make any sense mathematically unless people will share something they really like, and Facebook has already kind of tagged that article or tagged that meme as it's not going to show up in people's news feeds, even if you're sharing it. So it could be shared 100 times, but I'm not reaching your friends on your profile because Facebook has decided they don't want it to reach your friends.
Right.
So it's getting a lot of shares, but it's not getting any reach. And that's the only way that could be happening, is if what you're sharing, Facebook has decided they don't want you to share. They don't want your friends to see what you've just shared, what you've just decided to share. And that's happening a lot on my page. Also, my page bleeds likes every day for the reason of, when you go and look in, where did these people go? Where did these profiles go who used to like my page? And every day I'm bleeding likes, and they're Facebook generated unlikes. So it's not you going and saying, I don't want to follow that page anymore and I'm not going to like it anymore. It's Facebook deciding for you and unliking me for you. That's happening to me. That's happening to my professional page. So I make a lot of progress, but it's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back in bleeding these likes. And I'm sure, if I were bigger, I'm not that big, but if I were bigger, it'd probably be worse than that.
Yeah, that's absolutely happening to not only yourself, but obviously there's been some
people get
very
banned.
infamous cases.
Tommy Robinson was just banned on Instagram for 18 hours. People get banned all the time. They're getting kicked off. There's the most recent one too. Oh my God, did you see the Sarah Jong tweets. If you're not following that, New York Times hired this woman who obviously had just an incredibly racist. She's like this crazy anti-white racist. And there's endless month after month after month evidence of this in her tweets. She's mean and nasty, anti-white racist, just hired to be a managing editor at the New York Times. So Candace Owens, a black right-winger, reproduced her tweets but changed white to Jewish or white to black. And she was kicked off Twitter for it.
Yeah, instantly banned.
Instantly banned. Meanwhile, this other woman not banned, and those tweets, the initial tweets, are still up. They're still up, and she's still not banned. Mm-hmm. But they banned a black woman for just saying the exact same thing and changing the white to black or white to Jewish. So that's clear evidence of bias in banning, political bias. And the list goes on. I mean, it's freaking endless. YouTube banning people, kicking people off, but not other people. I mean, it's all these Facebook crushing all kinds of right-sided news organizations already. They're gone, and then changing their trending news so that none of those links came up, and they've changed their algorithms so that links to those sites don't show. You want to link to some of these sites like Breitbart, you won't even see it in the news feed. You might post it, but it won't show up to your friends because Breitbart is fake news.
Right.
So there's endless proof of this on the internet. It's not an Alex Jones conspiracy theory.
No. And, there's, to your point that, of whether or not these are private or public entities, I think this is a really important point. And I have a bunch of, I think we have to kind of start with some of the facts regarding this and some of the history, which I've done a lot of digging into, and, talk about what do we do? What are the legal remedies? What should the legal remedies be? What tactic do we use in these instances? What, if one concern obviously expressed by people on our side is, well, if we kind of use the government in some way as an instrument to intimidate or threaten these entities into giving sort of like equal airtime, are you doing more harm than good because you're getting the government
into the involved in the internet, which far people think that they're not. But that's a ridiculous, and we're going to see. I mean, we can go into some of this history if you want. Yeah, let's go into it right now.
That's a ridiculous claim.
It's just not true anymore. I mean, it maybe used to be true, but I think in America, it's pretty obvious that if you get to a certain size, you have to start doing the government's bidding, or they will find a way to crush you.
That's right, and that's already been happening for 30 years. I mean, the internet was started by the Defense Department in the 70s. I mean, that's how the internet started. It was ultimately turned over. The supercomputers they were using to share information and military and intelligence were turned over to the National Science Foundation and researchers there, which ended up becoming the skeleton of the internet. And in the 90s, there was, through the NSF, the National Science Foundation, provided something like 90% of the money to university computer scientists to help enable them to create, the skeleton, the infrastructure, the search engine of the internet, including an NSF grant, back channel funded through a program called MDDS, which was NSA CIA funded, that funded some of the first studies by the founders of Google, Brin and Sergey Brin and the other guy. So the original work that was done that actually started, or that Google was founded on, the search engine algorithms, were actually funded by government grants. And the idea at that time was that something like an internet, while being potentially a ripe commercial, profitable venture, also could provide a sort of almost infinite way for intelligence and military intelligence to, spy on and track.
Do you think they really
enemies of the
saw
United
that?
States.
Did they really see that as a possibility of this thing?
Absolutely.
I have a hard time thinking that they could envision what it's become, that people could log in, that we would log in and give so much information to these sites. I mean, I think that more than anything,
No,
nobody.
I don't think anyone foresaw. No one could foresee what it's actually become. I think the idea was that, and there's evidence of this, and we can post some of it. That
they could hack into your computers with this internet. Is that?
Well, sure. Or that you could follow trends in networks. That there was, the military and intelligence obviously had, it wouldn't take much brains to realize that, through networks of computers. And again, this is the 90s. We're not talking about the 1950s here or something. I mean, computer and networking had already been.
So how is this relevant to today, though? I mean,
I'm getting there. So the point is after fast forward a little bit to 2001, 9/11 happens. There's a really interesting case, but the Quest CEO at that time was approached by the NSA, who said, turn over your user data. He refused. He said, I want a warrant. You need a warrant to get that information. He's then charged with insider trading and goes to jail for 5 years. So that's an interesting case if anyone wants to research it. A guy named Joe.
I heard about that.
So then we get into Edward Snowden's revelations.
Right.
About the PRISM program, where the government is essentially scooping up all of our internet data, texts, internet searches, everything basically, and uses that as a backdoor into spying on just about everybody.
Yeah, let's not forget who was on that PRISM list. It was Facebook. It was everybody.
It was everybody. It was Apple.
It was Apple.
Twitter.
There wasn't Facebook, a single big tech company that wasn't on that PRISM list, on that PowerPoint PRISM list that Snowden released.
And so they were not only incentivizing these companies to work with the government in this way, but they were compelled to, in essence. They were, let's, look at the Quest case as a shot across the bow. I mean, they can get you. And so if you're not going to, like you said, if you're a multi-$100 billion company at this level, you're going to be cooperating with the government. They also get government contracts to do, military defense research like AI and drones and things like that. And there's all sorts of ways in which they work with the government. Okay, that's not terrible in and of itself, but just consider the context here that these companies are in bed with the government. And then now last year, in 17, if you remember this hearing that the Senate did, they brought Zuckerberg in, and they brought in executives from these companies. And at that hearing, and this is a great quote, this was a guy that was in the Senate hearing, a guy named Clint Watts, who was a former FBI agent. He said, quote, "Civil wars don't start with gunshots. They start with words. America's war with itself has already begun. We all must act now on the social media battlefield to quell information rebellions that can quickly lead to violent confrontations and easily transform us into the divided states of America," unquote.
Yeah. And this is all this, that goes into the whole Russiagate meddling thing. Like it's some sort of horrible thing that Russian people took out $100,000 in ads on Facebook, and that somehow affected our elections. Or how horrible it is that somebody hacked into the DNC, and it could be, by all accounts, it looks like it was an inside job, not a hack. But that we got this information at WikiLeaks, that the DNC was working with the press and with Hillary, that's like, they were all one organization basically working together to elect Hillary as president of the United States. So yeah,
this is a red hair, the Russia, and this hearing that I'm quoting from, the name of that hearing was "Extremist Content and Russian Disinformation Online."
Yeah, so I just could never really get like all excited about this. Like, what am I supposed to be worried about?
Exactly.
$100,000 in Facebook ads and information that I actually appreciate that we have this DNC Hillary press collusion. I'm glad we know that. Am I supposed to hate it because it may have come from some Russians. And no, it's right that we know what's going on. It's right that we know the truth. And if people have evidence and facts about something, I don't care who gives it to me. I'll take it.
Right. And
if there's this is so creepy what you just read, like information rebellion.
Well, so going on in that hearing, this is Dianne Feinstein and others, including Republicans who barely objected to any of this. She basically said, one senator said, I gather that this is Sheldon Whitehouse, Democratic senator from Rhode Island, asked, I gather that all of your companies have moved beyond any notion that your job is only to provide a platform and whatever goes across it is not your affair, unquote, to which all answered in the affirmative. In other words, these people were essentially being told that their job is to silence sources of rebellion. Mark Warner, who's a really evil guy. People should follow this guy. There was recently an article, it was leaked, Senator Mark Warner of Virginia leaked a kind of a draft plan that he has.
Oh, yes, I remember that. That just happened, maybe a week and a half ago?
Yeah. And this is in Reason. This is in other outlets.
Yeah, so this document comes out. Basically, it's like a proposition for how the internet would get regulated, how
exactly.
The government would crush the rights and the power of these executives like Zuckerberg and so on.
Right. It was called the Potential Policy Proposals for Regulation of Social Media and Technology. It was a draft policy paper, and he's got all these kooky.
He's a senator, Mark Warner, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. This is a very powerful senator.
This is a powerful senator. A document leaked out of his office, like purposely leaked, I'm sure. This is how we're going to get you.
And he's one of the ones who's been absolutely hysterical about Russian, quote unquote, Russian disinformation. Yeah. This is all a red herring to justify government.
They have yet to produce a single fucking vote that was altered. Or there's no Russian. I don't even understand this. Like, it is so fake from one side to the other, and I can't figure out why people are getting all upset about it.
Well, and there's also evidence that in another article I was reading that Warner was behind pushing Facebook to remember how they went out and they found these ads, this $100,000 in ads.
Right.
They're under pressure to basically, you guys go find something, anything.
Find us something.
Find us something. And then, oh, well, we found these $100,000. Somehow we've tracked them to Russia. But
meanwhile, we've seen no proof of this. Like, we're supposed to just trust, this $100,000 that came from Russia. And the only reason that I do is because it's so lame and weenie. If you're going to make something up, at least make something up that's actually horrible. That actually makes me go, but $100,000 and these stupid ads. Like, if you look at the ads themselves are just absurd.
Yeah.
And then it turns out that these $100,000 in ads and stuff didn't even take a side. It was like both sides. And I mean, come on, like, I don't care. I really just, big deal.
But the larger context is just that, you've got a real threatening, you've got Congress really on both sides. And my point in saying all this is that we live in a society there's not a clear distinction between private companies and public companies. These giant mega
not at this
tech
size,
companies,
there's not.
No, they live under the constant threat of regulation and harassment by the government.
Right.
And
they could stand up to it. It's not like they couldn't. I mean, they could stand up to it and try to get lawyers and be very public about what's happening to them and so on. But the problem is that ideologically, they're weak. So
correct.
They don't have the moral backbone or the principles to stand up to this. And they're also...
No, in fact, they might enjoy it. They might want to use this power themselves because they see themselves as arbiters of, social justice.
Yeah, now they can shrug and go, hey, well, it wasn't my decision.
So
the government made me do it.
Exactly. And, so now you have mega tech CEOs that are already ideologically inclined towards the left being threatened and politicians wanting to use this power in a way that benefits them. In other words, politicians, very few of them actually want to expose this or throttle this power back. They just want to use it to their own advantage, and so we have a very dangerous situation. Now, there's this other argument that, there's this public versus publisher versus platform concept. Do you want to get into that?
No, I don't want to get into that just yet. I want to focus on the independence question because, okay, so it's not just that. I mean, it's not just that paper that was leaked a week and a half ago or whatever. It's not just 2 years of obvious stifling of any right-sided news organization. It's just kind of a general threatening thing. And then I had this other quote here I wanted to. Chris Murphy, who's also a senator, I think, he tweeted this. InfoWars is the tip of a giant iceberg of hate and lies that uses sites like Facebook and YouTube to tear our nation apart. These companies must do more than take down one website. The survival of our democracy depends on it. So this is just the start. And these senators and government officials are pushing for this. So we know we know what they're doing overtly in your face, saying stuff like this. What are they doing behind the scenes?
Right. Great point.
And there was a great article, a very sympathetic article written by Wired magazine. Maybe it came out before those hearings, but it was about Zuckerberg and the pressure that he was under to, with respect to right-sided news and kind of crushing it, and the kind of pressure that he was under politically as well as, and this I believe, because I've seen this in a smaller way, and that is your competition also is out there and is trying to use the government against you. Mm-hmm. So in today's day and age, it's not just, hey, let's look at Facebook and see if they're corrupt. Is Facebook's competition corrupt because they're the ones who are paying these politicians to crush Facebook?
Exactly.
So
and the government could work with their competitor, like you're saying. They could always threaten to, we'll give them a large defense contract and we'll help them, and we'll threaten either Zuckerberg with some crime or with some form of regulation that could instantly put them out of business to the benefit of their competitor. Yeah.
So this Wired article is full of just gross cronyism and, private companies and government working to put a lot of pressure on Facebook. And it's kind of a poor Zuckerberg article, but it's fucking illuminating. And I encourage everybody to Google that. Just Google Wired Zuckerberg. I think it's worth reading. It's kind of long, but it's fascinating. And even the left is kind of saying, holy crap, like the government's really pressuring these Silicon Valley companies. So that was a while back. And then we see that Zuckerberg has definitely taken that mission on, and he's definitely been crushing right-sided news and right-sided sites all the last year and a half. And we got an election coming up. And as you said earlier, Alex Jones has also been just recently on kind of one of his special little missions has been to get Julian Assange pardoned by Trump. Right. He's been circulating a petition for this. And he was, Assange's mom said that InfoWars had just approached her for an interview 48 hours before they took everything down. They crushed InfoWars.
And somehow like 5 companies all decide on the same night,
all at once. I mean, if you don't think that was a freaking phone call from a politician saying, you do it fucking now or else.
Yep.
I don't see any other possibility behind this. Not when all of these companies do it at once. It's not like it's, and what was it? I forget which company. I think it was Facebook that sent out an announcement about it at 3 a.m. Like there's just kind of these suspicious, like, so Apple does it, and then overnight Facebook does it, puts out a thing at 3 a.m. Like, what are they doing in the middle of the night crushing InfoWars? And by the way, that was 3 a.m. Pacific time. That wasn't, because they're here. They're based here in Silicon Valley. So it was 3 a.m. their time. They're busy crushing InfoWars and putting out public statements about it. So no, everybody got a goddamn phone call. That is so clear to me. I'm not an Alex Jones conspiracy theorist kind of person. But this is really suspicious. We already know that he's under a lot of pressure. We see that overtly. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but we see a lot of political pressure overtly. We know ideologically these companies are in line with the left. And then they're receiving a lot of political pressure from the left and a lot of social pressure from the SJWs and so on.
Well, Sonny, we must act now on the social media battlefield to quell information rebellions. Didn't you hear?
Yeah, information rebellion. How un-American. That is creepy. That's fucking creepy.
So I think what we've basically saying is that there's no clean line between private companies and government. That's a rationalistic fantasy.
I think it is a fantasy. I'm sorry to say it, but and I don't like the idea of adding more regulations to the government, more overt regulations. I mean, a lot of this is happening behind the scenes, and it's happening from probably threats we don't even really truly understand, how they could get to Zuckerberg and what kind of real threats. I mean, they could probably throw any one of these guys in prison for something. So who knows?
So part of my argument and where I'm coming from, where I'm going with this is something that I haven't heard anyone else say really, is that we have to be careful of the size of these companies to protect us from the government. In other words,
that's an interesting point. It's not the old days where you can have Standard Oil and know that Standard Oil doesn't have power over you.
Exactly. Because Standard Oil, they're a company that, you buy their oil or you don't. This is a case where, the government is so in bed with these companies, and we essentially have almost like a fascistic corporatist structure where there's almost no line between private companies and the government. And if the government can use this power to censor us or to manipulate us, we have, in order to stop the government, you have to start looking at these companies, which are essentially vassals of the government. I mean, look what's going on in China. We've heard about this, the social credit system, where they're going to use the internet as a way to ding people and track them and give them credit, which will affect, their ability
I think it's a really interesting point to bring up China, because the other thing that I think it's naive to think that we are not impacted by the policies of other nations. So you have, Europe wanting to also censor, and they're suing the hell out of Facebook. Anytime somebody criticizes Islam in Germany, Facebook is fined, $1 billion or something. It's like these insane rules. So Facebook has had to figure out how to create algorithms to make sure that does not happen in order to not be fined all this money. And so they have these algorithms now. And then, of course, they're going to apply them to us. Do you remember when Europe changed their something rules, and all of a sudden, every site you logged into, you had to check, okay, yes, I've read the new fucking rules. That was all because of Europe. It wasn't because of what's going on in America, but all the sites had to suddenly be in compliance or they lose their European market. Just like that. Mm-hmm. So, of course, the sites went in compliance, and you had to click that damn box. And, of course, Americans were not paying any attention. But my point is that the censorship that's happening in Europe is getting forced on us.
And if anyone doesn't think that the government would not stop or would cease to use these types of massive server and surveillance, this massive server and surveillance ability of these companies towards their own political ends, you're crazy. And they already are. I mean, obviously Prism showed that they're already using these tools to spy on people domestically. And, we've got a bit, so this is not a kind of fantasy world where we've got these private companies and we've got the government, and never do they meet, and these private companies can do whatever they want, and it's up to the government to protect their rights to do it. I mean, that's all not happening. That's not really what's going on here. There's a huge danger, and add to that the fact that these CEOs are not only just not principled or amoral or just go wherever the money is, they are left leaning to put it mildly.
Right.
So some of them are probably sympathetic to these cuffy Meigs politicians who want to use these tools to throttle their enemies. So they're compliant, and they can then get away with disproportionate throttling of conservatives because they've been told by the government they have to quash the information rebellion. And so how do they do that? Well, the politically correct way to do that is to start to shut down conservatives because no one complains. Although they've been shutting down leftists too, but disproportionately they're shutting down conservatives.
Right. So I hear what you're saying. What you're saying is that the horrible anti-freedom laws of anti-monopoly and antitrust might actually be importantly useful here, because if a company gets too big, it does get too powerful. And by powerful, we mean government powerful.
Right. Not that the company itself.
Right.
Because a company, in a free market, a company can't do anything except, withhold their product. You can just choose not to use their product, go use another product. But that's not really what's happening here.
It is really curious to me why there hasn't been an alternative to Facebook that's actually been successful. I would go over there. I would switch to another social media company totally if there was one that actually had a successful platform, and there isn't one.
But do we think that if a company got as successful as Facebook, they wouldn't be under the same political pressure at that point?
Yeah, they would be under the exact same political pressure. But there have been some people who've started up competitor companies who are not left-leaning. They are explicitly free speech, champions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But they haven't yet created a platform that works as well, I guess. I mean,
it'll take time.
It's going to take some time. I've checked out minds.com. I have an account on there. You can follow me on there. And that one is actually run by an explicit free speech champion. And he's working with a lot of these YouTubers, and mostly YouTubers, I think, who are getting deplatformed and stuff over there. He's working with them to make sure that Minds is really video friendly. So that could be a good alternative. That might get better, but it's a little clunky right now. I don't know. It's got to be streamlined. It's got to work better.
If this were just like a free market issue, like in the same way that, let's say McDonald's said, we're not serving black people anymore. Right. I mean, any company that starts to do stupid things, they're gonna suffer the consequences in the marketplace. So I have no doubt that over time, in a completely free market, their alternatives will develop. But there's also, in this like kind of corporatist world that we live in, where the government, can threaten to harass, regulate, jail people for not complying with what they want them to do. It's not so simple. And I'm afraid that even alternatives, should they crop up, they're going to be sitting in that hearing with Dianne Feinstein in 3 years, and she's going to be saying, "Oh, don't you know that your role isn't just to be a platform. You have to quell the information rebellion now." So I think there's a bigger problem here.
When I see this happening, and Candace Owens and Charlie Kirk, is that his name? Charlie Kirk from Turning Point. They went and had breakfast, and they ended up having to leave because they were surrounded by a crowd of angry. I mean, I don't know how that happened so suddenly. It must be social media. But next thing you know, there are people protesting them, and they were just having breakfast.
Yeah,
and
brown shirts.
There's fat, pasty, fucking pink-haired assholes with megaphones screaming in their face. And one guy had a whistle and was blowing a whistle right in Candace Owens' ear, which is assault as far as I'm concerned. Noise assault. I mean, that can actually permanently damage your hearing. And of course, the police were there protecting them, but no one got arrested. I think they should all have been arrested. But so you have incident after incident after incident like that, with people on the right being harassed, people trying to have rallies, their own rallies, their own protests about something. And of course, Antifa shows up to pick a fight, to shut them down, to make it about violence instead of about the message of whatever these people on the right are trying to say, even if whether you like it or not. I'm thinking of Charleston, and these guys were just protesting the removal of a statue. And it used to be that we just let Nazis protest if they wanted to, and we don't assault them, we don't harass them. It's not okay. And instead, a bunch of thugs showed up and turned it into a little battle, and someone ended up getting killed. And so, anyway, when you see all that happening, and I just think that we're getting to the point where, it's at the point. If you're on the right, it's not like the government is showing up with the army to prevent you from speaking in a venue. It's that the left is being allowed to threaten and harass venue owners. They're being allowed to threaten and harass people who want to go hear somebody speak. This goes for comedians who can't, Owen Benjamin, he can't just book a club and do a show. He has to set up in a warehouse somewhere in some shitty part of town and give away the venue's address at the last minute to ticket holders, because otherwise people will be attacked for attending his comedy show. So that's going on in America. That's the reality of that's what's going on the street. If you're an activist on the right, or you're a voice on the right, and you get too big, you're going to be shut down. And imagine how many people that stops from even speaking up, because you don't want to be harassed. You don't want to be put in a situation of violence. I worry about, I'm kind of small potatoes yet, but let's say something I do goes viral, and I have not put a single word online about who my daughter is or who her father is, because I will not put myself in a situation where people can threaten her. And then I have to quit being an activist and quit doing what I'm doing because I'm worried about her safety.
Right.
They can get to you, and they can silence you with intimidation and harassment. So that's the world that we live in. And then InfoWars, a news organization, a crazy one that we can all go, well, we can't defend InfoWars because they're crazy. But they're just the first.
No, those are the ones that we should be, we're not, free speech isn't designed to protect us talking about the weather.
And the fact that this is a coordinated effort by multiple companies at once is chilling as fuck.
Well, here we get into remedies, because, a lot of people on the right have said, we can't use antitrust or anti-collusion laws or restraint of trade laws. That's bullshit. In the same way that Rand, said or encouraged people to use the fairness doctrine as a way to get the right heard on campus. If there's a bad law, like antitrust laws, which we all agree shouldn't exist, or there's restraint of trade laws that the FTC can employ, we should be using those laws for the good guys. And the only people that are justified in using those laws are the people who oppose them.
Yes, right. I agree. We oppose them. We're for freedom, and we're justified in crushing people who are trying to crush us with those laws. I mean, we're the only people who would have the moral right to use those laws. But
otherwise, you're saying let's let the government persecute the good guys.
it
and
makes
we're
me
gonna
a
stay
little
out of it.
uncomfortable, and it makes me a little squeamish. But I think I got to get over that, because I think that it's. I mean, the next step is that we actually do lose our government right to free speech. First they'll crush us socially, and they're succeeding in that. They have succeeded in silencing the right. They did it with the IRS. They crushed the Tea Party, and they're doing it with all these activists. They're allowing Antifa to run wild against people. They're allowing people to be assaulted. They are allowing people to threaten comedy clubs if they have the wrong comedian. The government is allowing this. Mm-hmm. And because of that, I actually think we need like an amendment. We're not allowed to discriminate against races and certain sexes. We need to add ideology to that, or something. We need to add some sort of First Amendment right to, you can't, even if you're a bakery, you can't discriminate against someone because they're black. Well, you can't discriminate against someone because, I don't know, this is a little bit scary, because I do believe that the baker shouldn't, the Jewish baker shouldn't have to bake a Nazi cake. And I don't want to go there. But I don't want Facebook to be able to discriminate. At this point, I think they're so large, they control so much, and with putting these pieces together and saying they're really controlled by the government, they're being threatened by the government, they're not acting as a free company with no government constraints. That is not how they're acting. I think then we can force on them a fairness doctrine, some sort of anti-discrimination bill. I don't know. I think I would actually be for that at this point.
I don't know if I would agree with that, but I think there are other remedies. I think first of all, using, like in this case, the fact that these companies all colluded to silence Jones, I think that's a clear restraint of trade case, and I'm sure he'll pursue some sort of legal remedy. But under existing law, you would think that he could take that to court. I think there's other ways
he can take that to court. It'll take years. And in the meantime, we have this midterm election. And honestly, if the left wins, they're going to impeach Trump, and we're going to have a civil goddamn war on our hands. That's
I don't think
what's
they'll be able to
happen.
Impeach him because the Senate, they won't get 60 votes in the Senate. But yes, they will try to impeach him if they win. I don't disagree with the idea that we're headed towards a civil war if the Democrats go this direction.
If they they are so crazy at this point. Just look at their behavior over the last 2 years, and I think if they ever get control of the government again, we're toast.
Yeah, I agree. They're dehumanizing the right now. The movement isn't we're against your policy.
Right.
It's you're inhuman.
You're inhuman.
If you're against us.
And it's okay for Antifa to come and punch a Nazi and whatever because you're a Nazi.
Yeah, they're breaking down the line between like political and civil discourse and violence. That if you oppose them in any way, you're not just someone they disagree with. You are an existential threat to their existence that needs to be wiped out.
So with all this going on, it's actually been a pretty depressing week. And I don't know what exactly remedies we're calling for. I think we're saying the gloves are off, and I think a number of different things could happen to fix this, and we'd be for it, even if it involved government regulation. The last thing I'll say is, I think you're right that only the good people get to do this stuff, get to use this stuff and still be moral. Only the good people in war can morally kill innocent people. On the other side, you're horrified by the idea of Germany dropping bombs on London, but we don't really hear those stories about the Allies dropping bombs on Berlin. You don't see movies of people crowded in bomb shelters in Berlin, and yet it was probably just as horrible. Mm-hmm. But I'm sorry, you're Nazis. You've started this war. You're murdering people. We didn't start it. We didn't invade you.
Damage.
It just, you deserve it. I'm sorry to say, it's still just. It's not immoral to drop a bomb on Berlin in World War II, but it's immoral to drop a bomb in the same case on London. So in this case, it's not immoral to hamstring the left. It is immoral to hamstring the right. I think is what I'm saying. Because we're the ones who actually don't want to hamstring anyone. We actually want open and free debate. Nobody on the right ever called for stifling, Salon.com.
Right.
So I think, we have to take the moral high ground is the point. And we have the moral high ground. We're the good guys. We're actually for freedom. And, if you think about the revolutions, the history of revolutions, and at least in the modern age when people were fighting for supposedly independence and freedom and stuff. And on the one hand, you have America that, after tarring and feathering their neighbors, they pick George Washington and they end up with a fair government where you can't tar and feather your neighbor. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, you have France, who ended up with a government where you could complain about your neighbor and your neighbor's head would get chopped off. Mm-hmm. So,
and they ended up with Napoleon.
And they ended up at the end of that, because that was so horrifying, they ended up with Napoleon. So which direction are we going to go? But that doesn't mean that we don't tar and feather our enemy. You don't say, oh, we don't want to be the kind of society that tars and feathers our neighbors, so we can't tar and feather our enemies right now. Are we at the point where we can tar and feather our enemies? I think in a way, yes. I think in a way, this is getting to the point where we need to do what we need to do to end the stifling of free speech in this country, socially.
Right,
with social media, with the
road.
harassment in the restaurants, the harassment on the street, the harassment of people who want to go and use their First Amendment rights to protest something. This is scary shit. And the next step is that we don't have the political right to free speech. That's what comes after this social. But, what will be the point? It'll be a formality by the time the government does it, because nobody on the right will have a platform.
Right. They're ripening the culture philosophically, then they're ripening the culture politically through these tactics.
Raping or
and
raping?
Dehumanizing people.
Yeah, they are. They're dehumanizing us.
And then the next step, like you say, it's a formality then for them to just say, oh, that's illegal now.
By the time it's political, it's a formality. That is just the truth. That's how things happen in the world. So,
and by the way, there has been some court pushback too. There's been some lawsuits, and they haven't gone that far though, unfortunately. There's people, and I think this should continue. There are people that have tried to sue these social media companies for either breach of contract or First Amendment, and for the most part, they've lost. There's some appeals going through, but I don't think that should stop. I don't think that should stop people from trying to maybe venue shop. As we get more good judges. I think anyone hurt or demonetized by these platforms that were falsely advertised as free platforms should sue and push back against them.
You got to go out and vote in the midterms and vote Republican. And even if your Republican guy is the biggest jerk, is one of these GOP fuck faces that we can't stand, you got to vote for him, because we can't give power to the Democrats. I'm really kind of scared. I think if they have power, given the this
is what they're doing when the Republicans have power.
Yes. I'm just kind of afraid of now that they're sort of unleashed and out of the closet. I think that the next time they get power is going to be pretty freaking awful. And then you're going to have a civil war, because then you're going to have people on the right are going to end up, it's going to get bad enough that we're actually going to have to physically fight back. And I actually think that's right around the corner. With this Antifa, you're going to end up seeing brawls. There are already a couple of groups that go out to do their rallies, and they go out ready to fight. They bring big muscle guys, and they wear armor and stuff just to give a speech on the right.
Well, there was an article about the thing in Oregon recently with a Patriot Prayer was holding a rally.
Prayers, they're always,
and the Antifa people explicitly said, we got to bring weapons. We got to arm ourselves.
Right.
So it's going that direction.
It's definitely going that direction. And so anyway, that's our podcast for today. How can we? I don't feel very positive about it. I don't know. I mean, as somebody who likes to make jokes about horrible things, usually the more angry I get, the more I'm making up jokes about something. It's kind of the motivation for making a joke. But I don't really feel angry. I feel kind of like freaked out. It's like a different emotion for me. I don't know how you feel, Doug, but
Yeah, no, I think that what it tells me is that the right needs to get its shit together, and you need to
something's
act.
got to be done. What we're doing is not working. It's getting worse.
There's legal remedies. I think we can approach this in the courts. I think there's legislation like the 230 exemption that these platforms get. You know, they're trying to have it both ways by being a platform and not a publisher. I think if they're going to publish content,
I have a friend who's a lawyer. He was on the show, Ed Masla. She came on to talk about something. I have a friend who's a lawyer who looked it up and said that that's not possible.
Yeah, it's true. Well, it's not under current law and under current precedent, but what I'm saying is
pass laws.
Pass the law. In other words, the 230 exemption as it stands now, these companies cannot lose their exemption by becoming curators of content, but that's an easy fix. Just change the law. I mean, make them lose the exemption if they do this. So
yeah, maybe we need a new law that's a social media law that forces these platforms to accept everybody.
Well, either you're going to be a platform and you're neutral, or you're going to be a publisher and then you're open to being sued like a newspaper. And right now, this 230 exemption, they're getting it both ways. They're exempt and shielded from liability, but at the same time, they are acting as publishers of content. Because not only that, but there was a Republican that was shut down by Facebook, and that's effectively an in-kind contribution to the Democratic side, which is a violation of campaign finance laws. So I think you can use the existing laws to go after these people, and I think we should use every means we can. And the goal is a free society, but right now we don't have a free society. We have a society on the brink, and we've got to do everything we can to fight back against them. And if the good guys can win, well, we love freedom, and we will have a free society.
Rebuild. We'll hopefully have a society that's free.
We're not going to rebuild from concentration camps.
That's right. I mean, that's what I keep thinking about is like, we don't have a free society. We want a free society. If we let it get so far that we're in concentration camps, that's it. If we're so nice until they lock us up, I don't really see that working. And that's exactly what they're doing to us. They're using our freedoms against us, and they're using our civility against us. And we have to stop accepting that. We have to seize the moral high ground. And you're right, any means necessary. And when the left says by any means necessary, they're evil because they're evil, not because they're saying by any means necessary.
Right. Because their goal is subjugation.
Right.
Our goal is freedom. We're the good guys.
So anyway, is that how we're going to end the show?
Yeah, you got to fight.
Do you have a joke, or I don't know? I was asking you how you were feeling about the whole thing, because I'm not outraged. I actually just feel kind of freaked out. That's the point I was making.
I'm not any more freaked out. I know a lot of people are expressing the freak out. I'm more freaked out at the right than I am at the left. The left, we know the left. The left is a system of violence. I mean, their whole worldview espouses violence and force,
right,
to cajole people. But what scares me are the mealy-mouthed wusses on the right who are saying things like, well, these are private companies.
Yeah.
There's nothing we can really do.
It reminds me of how, like, right after an Islamic attack, where 50 people get slaughtered in a nightclub, and somebody comes out and the first thing they say is, hey, now let's not be Islamophobic.
Yeah,
it's kind of like, what are you talking about? like where's the Islamophobia? I'm looking at 50 slaughtered people in the name of Islam. Like, and you're worried about the Muslim down the block who hasn't been harassed yet?
Right.
I don't, like, why is that your priority? And I've seen a lot of people there,
I'm not worried about the backlash. I'm worried about the lash.
Yeah, it's like I've said something like, okay, so this happened, this is happening, and like somebody will comment and say, well, they're a private organization, they have a right to do it. It's like, I never even said anything about a law preventing them from doing what they want. I'm saying what they're doing is wrong. And your knee-jerk reaction is to defend them and their right to fucking be free?
Exactly. That's a great point. It's sort of like, well, this restaurant just decided to kick out everyone with red hair. And you say, well, that's their right to do it. I mean, it's still stupid and immoral.
Yeah. Did anybody say that we're going to have a red hair police? No. We said
We're
it's
just
wrong.
saying it's morally wrong. The legal remedy is a separate question.
Honestly,
and we can debate
if you're knee-jerk, when you hear a moral attack against these media companies and these social media companies, and your first response is, well, they have a right to do it, you have bought the left's propaganda or something. Why is your knee-jerk response to defend these fuckfaces?
Because the left is going to say that now because it gets them to their goal. The left are the ones saying, hey, we're private companies, we can do anything we want.
Right. Oh, now they love private companies.
But if they were shutting down the left disproportionately, what would their argument be? Oh,
I'll tell you what it would be. They wouldn't make the argument. They'd blow the thing. They'd blow the place up. That's how angry they would be about it.
They'd just try and shut it down legally. They'd do anything they could.
Yep. All right. Well, so that's the end of the show. Thanks for joining us today. A little bit of a somber show. Thanks to all of you listeners, and especially our elite squad. You pay for this show, and you guys are so cool. You're so elite. We look forward to your jokes on the voicemail that you have not yet left yet. We're completely fan-funded, so we need your help. If you want to join our elite squad, you will get mugs, t-shirts, separate private access to us, secret Facebook groups. Go to patreon.com/House of Sunny to join up, and we'll talk to you next week, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the House of Sunny podcast. Go check out Sunny on YouTube at her channel, House of Sunny. Everything Sunny does is fan-funded, and because she's likely to get kicked off and demonetized on every platform at some point, please support her over at patreon.com/House of Sunny. Become one of Sunny's elite squad and have access to behind-the-scenes footage, t-shirts, special events, and more.